Coming up, Florida gets a win for the ages and LSU takes the beating of a lifetime. It's all on the way next on AT&T's SEC Country Live. So much to get into from the big weekend around the SEC. So for the next 60 minutes, let's buckle up and let's try to talk about it all as Florida gets a big win. LSU, I'm not sure what happened in Starkville, and then everything in between. We are starting to see, as conference play begins around this league, we are starting to see some real storylines take shape.
Yeah, just as we thought, a huge congratulations out to Vandy, Kentucky, and Mississippi State, right?
Of course, absolutely.
It just falls in line with everything.
So we said all summer long.
Yeah, exactly. Easy enough. On to the show.
By the way, that's Mike Johnson. My name is Brandon Adams. It's AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. So let's start with item number one on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. That is the Hail Mary that wins the game for Florida against Tennessee. Now, some people, I guess, are debating about whether or not this is supposed to be a Hail Mary, given the fact that you didn't have a whole bunch of, receivers in the end zone. Yeah. You really just had a one receiver versus one defensive back route, I guess, more appropriately to say. But nonetheless, Tyree Cleveland catches it, Felipe Franks throws it, and Florida goes from being a team that got clobbered by Michigan and for most of the game against Tennessee, not able to find the end zone offensively, to all of a sudden, all that seems a little less significant and a lot more attention being paid to the fact that this team got the touchdown when it needed to and got another win over Tennessee after having their long winning streak snapped last season.
As exciting of a finish as I've seen in quite some time between these two football teams. Maybe the most exciting finish we're going to see all year in terms of that SEC football. I don't think that they were going for the Hail Mary. He ends up throwing it over the top. Obviously, the huge touchdown, Felipe Franks and company being able to get that W. But this was a game that was so ugly for most of the game.
Yeah.
I mean, both of these teams just shooting themselves in the foot. The celebration penalty against Kelly there in the end zone, Felipe Franks with the late turnover in Florida territory to be able to set Tennessee up for the game-tying touchdown. Just ugly all around. Ugly offensive line play, ugly quarterback play. Florida's able to eke out a win, and I can't say this enough. That was just as exciting as an ending as you'll find.
Well, as they say sometimes, the cliche, they don't ask you by how many, they ask you how much, and for Florida, it counts as a win. And after the game, Felipe Franks talked a little bit about what he saw on the touchdown that ended it all.
On that last play specifically, I think the line just did a great job just giving me protection. Tyree just did a great job, getting to his landmark, getting to his spot, did a great job making a ball hawk play. And, we were blessed to come out with a win.
So, I alluded to this earlier. Does this change things for Florida? Do you feel better about Florida? I mean, I will tell you, from someone who comes from the perspective of talking to Georgia fans every single day on Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, well, the Dog fans are feeling pretty good about themselves based on how bad both Tennessee and Florida looked for most of this game. How much does the touchdown at the end change the evaluation of Florida here?
I don't know that it does at all. And I think there's a lot of question marks surrounding both of these teams. I mean, when you look at the way Tennessee's offensive line played, particularly at the left guard position, as ugly a game as you'll find. And I think you can flip it around and say a lot of the same things about both these football teams. I mean, it took Florida 8 quarters to be able to get a touchdown on the board in this season. And you thought you were going to have an improved offensive line. You thought you were going to have a great running game. The suspensions aside, these are two ugly football teams right now. These are two flawed football teams. And so if you're a Georgia fan, I don't blame you for feeling good about the SEC East right now. I think that a lot of these teams can still jump up and get you. I mean, you're going to have South Carolina that's going to throw everything at you. Tennessee is going to give you a great game. Florida, obviously, in that rivalry matchup, any of those teams can jump up and beat you. But they're so flawed right now, it's hard to look forward and predict any victories for these teams that are going to be meaningful. I mean, they really are. Normandy, you think, is an efficient passer coming into this game. All of a sudden, ton of turnovers. And the same thing goes for a lot of the other pieces in this game. You thought you knew what you had, and it turns out you didn't.
Specifically, Patrick Hopt, who is a terrific Florida fan in our comment section a lot here on AT&T's SEC Country Live, he said now the thing that people know is that Felipe Franks has a throwing arm. And I will admit, maybe this just makes me a knucklehead media member, but once you throw the game-winning touchdown, there's an element of me that does give a little more respect to Franks, even though the overall day for Franks probably not that great. You do give respect for throwing the touchdown there at the end of the game.
Yeah, in my mind, the way it was playing out, I think Florida was playing for the field goal. And I think that's the way Tennessee was defending. And obviously we'll get into that later. But I think that Felipe Franks wanted to get the ball downfield in 5 or 6 seconds, call a timeout, and be able to get the field goal team on the field. And I think his ability to roll out, make a play on the run, throwing it, with his arms downfield on the buttons there to Tyree Cleveland. I think, kind of adds a little bit of a mystique, a little bit of an element to Felipe Frank's game, but it doesn't change the fact that, only like 150 passing yards before that play.
I want to talk about the Tennessee side of this. Before that, though, a couple more comments. People want us to make sure we mention Chris Pack, Robbie Rainey, both saying, hey, how about the hold that probably should have been called on the Florida offensive line leading up to the Felipe Franks throw. And, I haven't watched the video probably as closely as many Tennessee fans have. I've certainly heard people, complaining about what the Tennessee fans here are kind of pointing out, that there was probably an obvious hold that was kind of, able to be gotten away with on that final play. Here's the thing, though, about final plays of games. I'm not telling you this is fair. I'm just telling you this the way it is. You get away with a lot of stuff on last plays of games that you don't get away with for the first 59.5 minutes. I mean, fair or not, that is the way that college football kind of works.
Yeah, listen, it would be a crime if we took this play away from college football. Now, I know Tennessee fans are mad about it, and obviously a lot of times you have a right to be, but I think if they had made a call like this, you'd be saying, man, what a crime that we took a play like this away from college football fans and away from Florida and just kind of awarded these other guys the game. That's how I feel. I want the referees to stay out of it. As a guy who played, I want the referees to stay out of these kind of plays because I think it adds such a mystique, such an excitement to the game to let these final plays play out. I don't want to see the offensive pass interference on the Hail Marys like a lot of people clamor for all the time. I want to see these plays actually come to fruition.
Chase Toole already talking about the Florida-Kentucky game. We may have a pretty fun week if on Monday afternoon people are already looking ahead to Florida-Kentucky on Saturday. That one could be a lot of fun. All right, item number 2, AT&T's SEC Country Live, 1st and 10. Let's look at the Tennessee side of this for a moment. I got to ask you. I don't mean to be like, typical shock jock, sports talker here, but what's Tennessee doing? I mean, what are they doing on that final sequence to not have? If I'm doing the math right, you can rush 6, and you can still have 5, playing near the end zone to protect against the touchdown here. What are they doing?
Well, I think they're playing to keep them out of field goal range. And obviously, you don't like some of the defensive performance. You don't like how it played out. But I think Butch Jones was actually right in trying to keep these guys from gaining 30 yards on this play. I don't think you can ever look at it and say, oh, well, you know what? He's going to be able to throw the ball 65, 70 yards into the end zone while he's rolling out of the pocket. I think if you're able to get to Felipe Franks in the backfield, rushing the passer, then you don't have those issues. So I don't really mind at all. It's the execution that comes out and looks awful for this Tennessee team in these final seconds. They even mentioned it on NFL Network. He had Randy Moss and a bunch of those guys on there kind of drawing circles around the Tennessee defense, asking questions. I didn't think it was as terrible a call as a lot of people did. But a lot of calls for concern when you let that guy get past you on this last play of the game.
Yeah, Dustin Michael O'Hara says that. How do you let that play get past you? And Dustin, I'm right there with you. And listen, I hate, the Monday morning quarterback stuff is like the most the biggest cliche in all of what we do for a living. But in this case, had you transported me to that Tennessee sideline and said all of a sudden out of nowhere, I'm the coach of Tennessee of this final play, even I know to say, hey, you got to watch out for Tyree Cleveland right there. He's the only guy on this field that can beat you.
Right.
He's the only guy on this field that can really make you hurt right now. And it'd probably be good not to have a safety matched up one-on-one with him. Whew. But that's exactly what Bob Shoop, the defensive coordinator, and Butch Jones, the head coach, allowed. It is almost inexplicably dumb to me.
Well, here's what I think happened. I think that the way that Florida was lining up, I think that Tennessee thought they were going to throw one of these crossing routes. They had 9 seconds on the clock, and Florida still had a timeout. So if you let Tyree Cleveland go up and clear out everybody in the secondary, and then they throw a crossing route that gives you 30 yards, Eddie Pinheiro, who's already showed us he can kick them from 70 yards on film, then I think all of a sudden you're looking at Butch Jones and going, what are you doing? They're going to try to get into field goal range and call the timeout. Obviously, he's probably told these safeties, hey, don't let this guy get behind you. Just obviously, we're not able to execute it because give props to Florida in this receiving corps, too much speed over the top.
Nathan Forrest, slightly different point. He says they did not have time to get into field goal range. Should have had 2 guys defending around the 10-yard line, backing up to the goal line as the play developed. How about that point? You say they did have a timeout left, which I didn't remember. So you do have to be respectful of kind of the middle of the field completion at that point in time. But you can't be single coverage against the best player on Florida's roster.
I have no problem with that. I think the only thing that you're thinking from the Tennessee time, and listen, the last thing I want to do is give props to Butch Jones. I've been calling for his job since midsummer. But I just have to play devil's advocate. When you look at it from the other way around, they're able to get that. 9 seconds is enough time to get a throw over the middle, get down and call a timeout and get your field goal unit on the field. And so I think you just have to be wary of that. It's not like this was blown coverage and the guy was 20 yards away from you in the back of the end zone. I think you have to question yourself, hey, how far down the field do we have to defend? How big is Felipe Frank's arm, especially when you're rushing a good number of people that should be able to get to him in the backfield?
We don't have time to do this in today's show. We've just got too much to do. But at a certain point in time this week, I want us to actually look back at some of Butch Jones' post-game comments because I was not impressed. I thought this was another example of this guy not owning the situation and realizing that Tennessee goes on the road to Gainesville. you shouldn't think anything other than we ought to win this football game.
Yeah.
The fact that we don't have time for that today. We got too much other stuff to take care of. But we're going to have to get on what Butch Jones said post-game at some point in time this week.
I agree. It's easy to go into Monday, and I think, you and I on the show focus on the victories, and I think, obviously you want to give props to Felipe Franks, but sometime during the week, we absolutely have to look back at Butch Jones and the way he reacted.
That is Mike Johnson. My name is Brandon Adams. It's AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Let's move on to another big game in the SEC from this weekend. It's the subject of item number 3 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10. And in Starkville, Mississippi, Mississippi State took that cowbell and beat LSU about the head and face with that thing all day long. 37-7, the final here. A lot of talking points kind of coming out of this game. I guess my question for you is, you're going to give more credit here for LSU for the win, or are you going to pay more attention, or I should say Mississippi State for the win or LSU for the loss? What's the bigger story here, the Mississippi State win, the LSU loss?
As a matter of respecting the Mississippi State program, I'm going to give more attention to the LSU loss. I think the Mississippi State's shown the ability to win some of these big games under Dan Mullen. Now, are they a consistent football team? Not in a lot of aspects, but they've shown the ability to do this. Obviously, knocking off some teams going to the #1 ranking a couple years ago. So I'm not ready to say, man, this win against the 18th ranked LSU team is a huge milestone victory for Mississippi State. So I'm going to give the attention to the LSU loss. I thought they were as manhandled as I've seen LSU maybe in my lifetime. I mean, I can't remember LSU ever being manhandled at the point of attack like they were by this ground game from Mississippi State. Credit to Dan Mullen. Credit to Mississippi State's football team. Credit to you for picking this runaway victory.
Why, thank you, sir.
Yeah, and all eyes on me for saying that I thought LSU was going to have a better game plan, because I thought we'd see things a lot differently. And obviously the ejection of the 2 defensive linemen played a little bit of a role in that. But just no answer. I mean, it was like they were continually getting punched in the mouth by Mississippi State, and there was just no answer or fight in LSU.
So, effort at full disclosure, I did pick Mississippi State to win the game. I do think LSU's got some problems. However, I didn't see a 30-point margin of victory coming. No. It's even worse than I thought. Charlie Adams in the comment section says, BA, I told you, Coach O is the new Ron Zook. It's probably too early to say that, but I definitely went into the season with some suspicions about Ed Orgeron. I love his energy. I love his knowledge of football. But being a head coach is about how presidential you can look. And I wasn't sure that Orgeron was going to be able to make that transition to kind of presidential CEO-type leader of a program. What we saw on Saturday is Orgeron's not ready for that role yet. Yeah. Targeting calls all over the place. Totally undisciplined, not staying at home on what Mississippi State's going to try to do. And for me, the LSU loss is slightly more significant than the Mississippi State win, not because I don't think Mississippi State's a good team. I think they proved that they are. But nationally, the team that was supposed to get some attention was LSU. Now, I said during the offseason, I didn't think LSU was worthy of that attention. And unfortunately here, 3 weeks into the season, I think LSU has proven, and the national commentariat here, I think they got to move on and find somebody else in the SEC to talk about besides LSU, because LSU is just not worthy of it.
Yeah, it's scary if you're an LSU fan, because you haven't seen this. For all the faults that Les Miles had, he didn't have any games that looked like this. And you thought you knew a little bit about both teams going in. You thought Darius Geis was going to be the best running back on the field. Aris Williams turns in, 23 carries for 146 yards. Darius Geis didn't get the ball enough. 15 carries for 67 yards. I thought he looked strong early. I thought he was doing some good things on the ground, but just not able to get back from him under this game plan under Matt Canada. And I think it's concerning moving forward when you see the numbers for Danny Etling, when you see the numbers for Darius Geis, when you look at how this entire game plan evolved for LSU. I'm not sure how they bounce back. I know that Ed Orgeron's a good coach. I know they've got good coordinators in there. But, man, as physically manhandled as I've seen LSU's team in quite a long time.
And you give Mississippi State a lot of credit for that, and it's Coach Dan Mullen, who met with the media after the game and had this to say.
Fitz, to me, came out, knew the game plan, executed and hit some play action shots for us. But really his management on third down I thought was huge for us tonight. A couple big ones, whether it was getting the ball to Keith for first downs, Donald Gray with a huge catch on a third down conversion there in the second half. That it was that management of putting us in the right situations that was huge. We're going to enjoy this victory tonight. Guys have the day off tomorrow. Get themselves healed up, get the mind right, and get ready to get back to work, because we have a huge challenge going on the road against another, I think, top 10 team in Georgia, and it's on the road. So a different style challenge for us, and we got to be ready to play.
So at the beginning of those comments, you heard Dan Mullen talk about Nick Fitzgerald, his quarterback, and right now, I think you've got to make some room at the very top of whatever your ranking of coaches who tutor quarterbacks. you got to include Dan Mullen very high on that list because he has made Nick Fitzgerald into an absolute weapon. Dak Prescott's lighting the NFL on fire. Add Tim Tebow in that discussion going back when Mullen was the Florida offensive coordinator. You know, whatever you say about Jimbo Fisher or maybe some of the other coaches around the country in terms of developing quarterbacks, you got to say some of that stuff about Dan Mullen too.
How about Alex Smith?
Yeah, that's a great point.
The draft, you know, still playing for the Kansas City Chiefs. That's what kind of quarterback Dan Mullen loves. You know, one of these dual threat guys that can absolutely hammer the ball home when they are able to get out on the edges and run the ball up the middle, and are able to do great things in the passing game. 15 of 23, 180 yards. I thought he looked as good as I've seen LSU allow a quarterback to look in a long time. And I know that seems to be, you know, the ongoing comment that you keep hearing about this game, but I just haven't seen it. I haven't seen LSU look like that against anybody. Nick Fitzgerald, for all his flaws that, you know, we think we saw last year, completion percentage a little bit down, comes in and absolutely takes over this game with his legs, with his arms, and all facets, and seems to be becoming the leader that we all think he can be right before our eyes.
Dan Daughtry in the comment section says, I don't know why I even clicked to listen to these clowns anymore. Listen, Dan, here's the one thing about our show that I'm really proud of. If we're clowns, if we get it wrong, especially me, that comment section's always open. And you know, the one thing we've established is a track record going back for months and months and months. You call us out for being wrong, we're going to give you the platform to do so. So if we're wrong and we're clowns, hey, there's nobody, I think, that welcomes in the opposite opinion, other people articulating a different point of view more than we do here.
I completely agree with you. I owned up to it. Listen, I picked LSU to win this game handily. I thought that they would overmatch Mississippi State athletically on the field and coaching-wise, and it just didn't happen. I mean, Ed Orgeron, everything we thought we might be getting out of this coaching staff, this different style of setup, the CEO, head coach, and letting the coordinators kind of take over, we didn't see it. And credit to Dan Mullen and Mississippi State for being able to get that
done. Let me hit a couple more comments here real quick. We'll move on and talk about Auburn and their problems on Saturday. Ron Thompson says, LSU, the biggest disappointment I've seen so far this season. I think you got to, you know, certainly make a case for that. And the BYU shutout at the beginning of the year where BYU doesn't cross midfield, that seems like it happened a different lifetime ago. That seems like it happened to another team in another era.
Especially when you add in what BYU looked like against Wisconsin this weekend. I think they got blown out by 35 points against Wisconsin. It's crazy. You know, as we start to go down these schedules, these teams start to shape this identity, and you are what your record says you are. And LSU right now is just not a good football team.
Michael Silburn says, get Brandon Walker on the show, the guy that hosts the Mississippi State podcast. We'll absolutely have Brandon on the show here this week.
He's been walking around here all day with his chest poked out.
Oh, he's loving life. He's loving life right now. So a lot of comments coming in. We'll continue to make sure we hit a lot of those, including your comment here as well on AT&T's SEC Country Live. Let me go to item number 4, though, in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So more struggles for Auburn. I didn't see a lot of this game. I was in Athens on Saturday, but the final score jumps out at you. 24-10, I believe it is. Auburn not able to put away Mercer until, you know, letting the Bears hang around a lot longer than they should have, doing a lot more than they should have been able to. What in the world is going on with Auburn right now?
Yeah, it's interesting, too, because the first thing I did, I go out and look at the stat line. I want to see what the stats were in the game. Cameron Pedway had 128 yards, 3 touchdowns. Jared Stidham, 32 of 37 for 364 yards. Wow, what an offensive performance. 5 turnovers, 4 fumbles, and an interception. Yeah. Cameron Pedway, for all the yards he had 34 carries. The only running back to carry the football, only averaged 3.8 yards per carry against a Mercer football team that's in the Southern Conference, you know, down in the FCS. And you think that Auburn would have been able to handle them. They just continued to shoot themselves in the foot. They need Kerryon Johnson back like no team I've ever seen. I mean, they've got to get his infusion of talents back on the field.
Bobby J. Smith says, can't wait to see what BA has to say about his SEC West champions, Auburn. It gives you the eyeball emoji. He's looking like a Sun Belt team. Yeah, right now they do, but I kind of find myself, is it Teddy Atlas, the ESPN guy, the boxing guy, who went off about the boxing fight result on Saturday, and in the middle of the conversation, he's like, I got nowhere else to go. Basically referencing his life in boxing, that he can't turn his back on the sport, even though that it's not looking too good. Bobby, here's the way that I feel about my Auburn pick at this point in time. I really got nowhere else to go. I mean, at this point in time, all I can do is hope that it gets better, right? Because right now, it's looking like 2015 all over again. And everything that I said during the offseason, just you know, the increasing confidence. I mean, if you go back and watch these earlier shows, and they're all archived on our Facebook page, it started out here, and over the course of the offseason, the confidence just sort of slowly started going this way, me getting more and more confident by Auburn by the day. This team is not good right now.
Well, listen,
and the season's a quarter of the way over.
For everything you said about Auburn, I don't know if it was to that level, but I was backing it up about Danny Etling and this LSU football team being able to take over the game offensively. And Matt Canada is going to be a game changer. And they have the bodies on the offensive line. They're going to be young, but they have all the athleticism. Listen, I couldn't have been more wrong too. And I know it's just one game, but it was the the performance just physically by LSU that I think was so alarming. And I think looking forward, they've got to ask themselves a lot of questions as well.
Let me let you hear some of Gus Malzahn trying to explain what he didn't like about his team on Saturday.
You know, we got to run the football better. I mean, you know, you look at it and it's 43 rushes and 146 yards. We got to run the football better, and you know, so we've got to solve that one. You know, looking at, you know, the passing, you know, Jarrett was 32 for 37. That's about as efficient as it gets. So that was on a positive, and I know the one interception, it was a bang deal right there on that. But I thought he did a solid job. But really, what stands out to me is we got to run the football better.
Deebo Samuel.
So how in the world could you have a crop of really good running backs? Herb Hand, a terrific top-shelf offensive line coach. You got Braden Smith, a potential All-American there, manning one of those offensive line spots. Why can't Auburn run the football against a team from Mercer? I'm not even sure which is it the Southern Conference? I'm not even sure which conference Mercer's even in, but they shouldn't be playing with Auburn step for step in Jordan-Hare Stadium.
Yeah, the Fighting Mercer. I don't know.
They're the
Tigers.
Bears. They're the Bears.
Okay, down.
I think they're the Bears, I believe. Yeah.
What they've been playing football for 5 years now, going on 5 years. They got their football team back, and it's concerning. And I understand that, you know, that you're thinking Cam Petway is one of those guys that can hammer home and allow Auburn to take over a game, and you think he's one of those Division I just hammers that you can give him the ball and then he'll take care of the game. It just, the turnovers are what killed Auburn. I mean, 4 fumbles. When you look at how this game started to play out, add in what happened to Sean White and the fact that he's been dismissed from the football team now, and there is a lot of questions going on about Gus Malzahn's ability to lead the team.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen it time in and time out where it's, you know, Gus Malzahn just can't get it done, and I think this is just another chapter. He's got a lot of work to do on this team.
Jamie Bailey says, how bad is Auburn right now? The truth is we don't know if they've hit rock bottom yet or not. But, and I know this is going to drive some of y'all crazy, I do think there's a turn coming for Auburn. And they may never achieve the ceiling this season that I thought it could achieve. But if you've got Auburn circled right now as an easier game on your team's schedule because of how they play through 3 games, I think you're going to be disappointed about that. At some point in time, they're going to play better. From a recruiting standpoint, this is still one of the most talented teams in the SEC.
Yeah, I think that's what's scary when you look at all these teams. When you look at Florida, when you look at Tennessee, LSU, Auburn, for everything that they have going wrong with their coaching and with some of the, you know, some of the quality of play, the penalties and the turnovers, they still have the talent to knock anybody off. So if you're an Alabama fan, if you're a Georgia fan, if you're one of these other fans from these teams that are on the rise, don't look at the schedule and just circle those games and say, man, we're just going to knock them off, because I promise you those teams are still going to show up to play and show up to play with a lot of attitude.
Jeremiah Matthews says, can Arkansas bounce back against Texas A&M? I'm actually looking forward to talking a lot about that game on Saturday, because that feels like an elimination game from one of the programs in that game. 11 a.m. start time in Dallas on Saturday. We'll talk about it throughout the week. Tyler Thompson also says Auburn's just like Florida. No offense, all defense, good defense, and keep a terrible offense in the game. So I do agree that there are some similarities between Florida and Auburn, both of which have probably played for this season below what their sort of expected standard was. You know, the FPI data, things like that, actually like Florida okay this season, although they haven't really shown that through most of the first 3 games. Probably Auburn the same way. But if you're looking about an offensive turnaround for one of these 2 teams, I still think Jared Stidham's a better quarterback than Felipe Franks is. So if you want to do the Auburn-Florida side-by-side comparison, I still feel much better about Auburn being good by the end of the season than I do Florida. And by good, I mean a threat to beat anybody in the SEC.
No, I agree with you. And listen, Kerryon Johnson and Cam Petway have not been on the field together yet, you know, there at Auburn. I think that that's a big key for them moving forward. And I'll say this, and I said this last week, I think Gus Malzahn has to take back over this offense. I think we've asked a ton of questions about Gus Malzahn as a play caller, what he can do as an offensive coordinator, an offensive mind there on the sidelines. If I'm him, I'm not putting my future in the hands of Chip Lindsey. And I think that this early 3-game stretch that we've seen out of them shows that Chip Lindsey's not ready for that job either. So if I'm Gus Malzahn, I'm telling you right now, he's made a ton of changes. The best change he could make is to take back over this offense and put his stamp on it.
While we're on the Auburn subject, I want to ask you about Sean White in just a moment. Let me squeeze in a quick comment before we do. John McKinney says that overall he thinks the SEC this season's weaker than he can remember it being. I'm not so sure that's the case yet. I just think that you may have a different crop of teams who were good this season. You mentioned Vanderbilt earlier. You mentioned Kentucky earlier. Mississippi State, who's coming in at number 17 in the AP poll this week. You know, that's not the expected teams, but those teams playing the way they are right now certainly speaks to a solid crop of teams in the SEC, even if they're not quite the suspects we expected to be performing that way.
Yeah. Listen, Vanderbilt, a huge win over number 18 Kansas State this weekend. A lot of these teams are starting to jump up that you didn't expect, and I think you have 2 brands of football being played right now. There's some teams that have a ton of talent that just aren't being able to get it done in the coaching positions, and you also have some of the teams that don't have as much talent that just aren't shooting themselves in the foot the way Vanderbilt's playing, the way Kentucky played this last weekend, the way Mississippi State played, you limit the turnovers. You're able to take advantage when the other team turns the ball over to you, and you're able to establish your ground game. And I think that's been big for all three of those teams.
All right, real quick here on the subject of Auburn. So Shaun White dismissed from the team for the public drunkenness issue over the weekend. This seems weird to me, right? I mean, I guess they've had issues with White going back before this, but you don't kick a guy off the team just for public drunkenness, right? I mean, I'm not trying to be flippant here, but isn't that what college is sort of about?
Well, listen, he was suspended last year for, I think, a half, maybe twice last year in Auburn season, and he was suspended for the first 2 games this year. And so I think when you start to pile all those things on top of each other, you say, okay, how many strikes is this guy going to get? Is he going to get 4 strikes? I think that number 3 is bad enough. He's in the headlines. Jarrett Stidham's your quarterback anyways. So, Shaun White, I'm sorry, but you've had enough opportunities.
I think they like Malik Willis, that backup right now. You know what? If Stidham doesn't start playing better, they may put Willis on the field at some point in time this season because I think they feel okay about being able to do that. Item number 5 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 is bad news for South Carolina. Gamecocks lose the game to Kentucky. We'll give Kentucky some credit for this a little later on in the show. But for me, the big story coming out of this game is one of the most electrifying players through 2 weeks in the SEC sees his season come to an end in week 3. That's South Carolina wide receiver Deebo Samuel. Now, Muschamp's not saying a whole lot about this right now, but the reports are that Samuel is done for the season. Before I let you weigh in, let me in fact let you hear Will Muschamp talking about the injury to his star wide receiver. Here's Muschamp.
Deebo Samuel broke his leg. He's out for the season, and disappointing for him. He's a wonderful young man, and extremely disappointed for that. And he was on the curl right on their sideline. I believe that's when he got rolled up. He came off the field and he tried to go again and didn't think. I believe it's his fibula. I don't have all the information, but I know that's he's going to be out for the year.
How big a blow is that for you guys?
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's not an unfair thing for McElwain or for Muschamp to say in response to that at all. How big of a blow do you think it is? It's terrible. And, we've really praised through the first 2 weeks of the season the South Carolina offense, but a lot of Bentley's completions and his most dynamic plays were when he was throwing the ball to Deebo Samuel, not to mention what Samuel does as a kick returner. Throwing to other receivers besides Deebo Samuel, not nearly the same South Carolina offense. I don't want to be too fatalistic here, but I think the Gamecocks take a big nosedive of that Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, just a tough ending to the storyline for him so far this season. And you're talking about a guy who not only is a big deal on offense, a big deal for Jake Bentley, but the return yardage he's been able to rack up. I mean, I think he's got over 500 all-purpose yards. Absolutely put his stamp early on the game with the early long touchdown that he had 5 catches for 122 yards on the game, but goes out in the third quarter. And it stinks because you want to see all these teams at full health. You want to be able to see a guy like Deebo Samuel that is so talented, be able to take over football games and put all his work on the line and be able to show people what he's doing. It's a huge blow, and you could see it all over Muschamp's face that I'm not sure how we bounce back from that. Now, they still have a ton of talent offensively. You're going to have to give the ball to Rico Dowdle a little bit more. The offensive line is going to have to pick up some slack, but you just don't replace a guy like Deebo Samuel. It's not, hey, next man up attitude. He was an elite talent at that position for South Carolina, and so a lot of questions going to be asked of them moving forward.
So I thought a South Carolina win here would have been more significant than a Kentucky win because South Carolina had looked better than its first 2 weeks than Kentucky had. If South Carolina were to be 3-0, would have beaten 3 Power 5 teams to start the season, 2 of them SEC teams. Instead, the 3-0 team here is Kentucky. I mean, how do you feel about Kentucky coming off this win? Going into Florida on Saturday, by the way, but is this a Kentucky team that's worth a look in the SEC East?
It's a Kentucky team that we thought we'd start the season with, and you didn't see the consistency earlier to start the year. I mean, they play Southern Miss to a 1-touchdown game. They play Eastern Kentucky to a 11-point victory, and this is the Kentucky team we thought we'd have. Strong offensive line, Biddy Snell taking over the game, Steven Johnson doing great things with his legs, the defense making timely tackles and creating turnovers. That's who we thought we had to start the season. And I think the lack of the consistency they displayed in the first 2 weeks in these non-conference opponent games led us to ask a lot of questions. Led us to ask, really, was Kentucky building to something? I think they had a resounding yes to that. I think that this victory over South Carolina kind of highlights that Kentucky brand of football that Mark Stoops wants them to play. They want to be efficient on the ground. They want Steven Johnson to make the plays he needs to. And a Kentucky defense without Jordan Jones in the lineup, able to make a number of incredibly timely stops and turnovers.
Darian Ford says, B, I had told you 6 months ago Vanderbilt was going to be sneaky good. Vanderbilt does get the win against Kansas State on Saturday night, setting up against Alabama this weekend. We'll talk about Vanderbilt, Alabama a lot this week here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. By the way, that's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. It is AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Let's move on here now, speaking of the Alabama Crimson Tide, and look at item number 6 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Another performance from Alabama where you see pretty strong stats coming from Jalen Hurts here. More than 70% completion percentage through a couple touchdowns. Some of that was of the kind of the run and catch variety, at least in the Calvin Ridley touchdown. But Alabama does get past Colorado State. Got a little bit of a flirtation with Colorado State making some noise early in the game. Alabama put them away after that. Moving into SEC play here on this upcoming Saturday. How do you feel about Jalen Hurts right now, and where is Hurts for you?
I think he's starting to define what he does well. And, it's so funny because I've been saying a bunch on here that Jalen Hurts' job is not to turn the ball over and is to take care of it. And I think when you look around the SEC at what some of the other quarterbacks did, Quentin Dormady throwing the picks, even Felipe Franks with an untimely interception at the end of his game, you want to continue to have Jalen Hurts do those things. Now, I think that obviously he's going to get the benefit of the doubt when you look at the stat line, 248 yards passing. But a lot of those were picked up after the catch, like you mentioned. I think they're doing a good job right now of allowing him to establish his arm, throw some balls into the flats, throw some of these quick slants. Colorado State was outmatched in the secondary, so their wide receiver core with the speed they have were able to take over and kind of make it look good. I think the bigger concern for me coming from this game was, what is Alabama on defense? I mean, really, what are they going to be able to do moving forward? They need Rashaan Evans back. They need Anthony Jennings back. They need to be able to do some of these things defensively that Alabama can do. They couldn't stop Colorado State in the second half. Colorado State has 400 yards of offense against an Alabama defense who hasn't let that happen in a long time to a non-conference opponent. So Jalen Hurts, in my mind, he's going to do Jalen things, but I don't know right now if he has that defense to fall back on that we've grown to love from Alabama.
That's a really interesting point. Now, on the one hand, Colorado State as a sort of, FBS offense goes outside the Power Five. That's probably a pretty good group. I think Mike Bobo, the coach of the Rams, is probably on his way to building himself into a coaching career. But you probably do have a couple concerns with the Alabama defense right now. Certainly, it's not fully plug and play with the guys they lost off last year's team. Yeah. But I do think the Fresno State game, the Colorado State game, more important for Hurts in terms of building his confidence. If you're going to have less than a perfect Alabama defense moving forward, it puts more pressure on the quarterback to be the true, unquestioned leader of this team. And you've got to be able to have strong performance in order to be able to do that. Now, some of y'all know that I am suspicious of Hurts, and I won't pretend to feel otherwise. I do think he's going to cost Alabama a national championship. But I think against Fresno State, against Colorado State, even though it was a lot of leaning on his legs at time, you did get the kinds of performances that I give Hurts a boost in confidence going into the game against Vanderbilt and the other SEC games that he'll play.
Yeah, and it's tough, too. I mean, you look at how Alabama historically has attacked teams. And it's like I said, Jalen Hurts' biggest job has been don't turn the ball over and get yardage when you can. Even if, there's not a draw or screen game in this offense, you pick up yards when you can with your legs. I just think that right now that defense isn't in a place where you can ask Jalen to go in, down and out, and say, hey, just don't turn the ball over. Because Nick Stevens, that quarterback from Colorado State, was able to take over this game at times in the second half against us. And you saw Nick having to leave his starters in at the end of the second half and have to play those guys meaningful snaps. And so I look at Alabama's schedule. I think it's still favorable. Vanderbilt's going to be a quality opponent on the road this week. You've got Ole Miss, you got A&M, you got Arkansas. I'm not sure which one of those teams jumps up, but I've been saying all along that one of these teams in the middle of Alabama's schedule is going to give them a test that you weren't sure they were going to give them.
Can we talk very honestly here for a second? Some of you on the comment section are just brutal. First of all, we talked about Auburn about 10 minutes ago. Even still in the comment section, people are blasting me for my Jared Stidham pick, blasting me for the Auburn stuff. So I'm seeing all these comments rolling, even though we've kind of shifted gears and talking about something else. And then now I've got some of y'all sort of taking roll about who's not here today. Jamie Bailey in the comment section talking about haven't seen Cliff Nelson yet today.
I was wondering the same thing.
Cliff is a great LSU fan, and we love Cliff in the comment section. But I haven't seen Cliff today. And listen, I don't ever want anybody to take a day off from SEC Country Live, but maybe he's watching and not commenting today.
Yeah.
It was not a great day for the purple and gold, so he can be forgiven if he wants to sort of sit this one out for a day.
Yeah, I can't remember who said it, but I heard it.
No, Cliff Nelson's in here now.
Hey,
yeah,
Cliff.
Cliff's in here now.
I just, and somebody on here said, man, you guys are idiots. Florida's a lot better than you're giving them credit for. What game were y'all watching? I mean, Florida won the game. It was on a 63-yard Hail Mary at the end of the game. And so, listen, I said this before they played the game that I think we were overreacting to the Michigan loss. But still, I'm not ready to call Florida world beaters by any stretch of the imagination.
How about this one from Cliff Nelson? He says, LSU needs to go, G-E-A-U-X, back to the drawing board. Cliff, that is a perfect response to what your team had to deal with on Saturday, and we appreciate you being in here taking your medicine for that. Listen, honestly, I say this all the time, but it really is true. It really is about my favorite thing about doing AT&T's SEC Country Live that, the way that we express our love for college football is boasting about it. We'll boast about our team. We'll boast about our picks. We'll say whatever. And the one thing I love about the comment section, I'm not just saying this to pump smoke or whatever, I really do mean this, is that our folks that watch this show, totally get the tongue-in-cheek nature with which all of this is said. And there's never a whole bunch of nastiness. There's never a whole bunch of, nobody ever takes it to a bad place. Everybody just does all this in fun. It's one of the reasons why I love coming and doing this show each and every day. For examples like that from Cliff Nelson, an LSU fan. He says, but you know what? I got to sit in here and take it from all sides today, especially those Florida people who are going to come after LSU here.
Yeah, credit to Cliff Nelson and credit to a lot of people for being able to answer those questions the day after on this message board. And that, like you said, that's what makes it fun. We have to show up. We've given our picks. We have to show up and talk about the games as well. And to hear some of you guys being able to chime in is always fun.
Oh, I'm actually a little bit behind in the comments. Let me knock a few more of these out, and we'll kind of get caught up on the show here. Richard Bernard also talking about that Arkansas-Texas A&M game. That's a game that's going to get a lot of attention later on this week. That's going to be fun with talking about. James Crump says, something wrong with my feed. I just saw someone post Florida will score 42 points. Yeah, so listen, James, you know this. It doesn't take these Florida fans very much to kind of, start feeling pretty good about themselves. And for 3.5 quarters, and this team could not find the end zone, all of a sudden the final play goes down, and all of a sudden they start feeling a lot better. And listen, I still think Florida's going to be a nemesis in the SEC East. For those of you that listen and watch Dog Nation Daily, I believe that Florida is still Georgia's chief competition in the SEC East. This is a tough program to kind of, put in the ground, basically. So they do live to fight another day, and I don't fault the Florida fans for feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. When you look at the way Florida's going to have to battle back, I mean, listen, they get the win against Tennessee, but going on the road this weekend against a Kentucky team that looked pretty good last week, I just wonder, I would love to get some of y'all's comments on how you feel going into that game as a Florida fan. I think that's important to keep our kind of hand on the pulse of that.
So like I said, I'm a little bit late in the comments right now. I'm going to have to try to get caught up here a little bit. So let me knock out a couple more topics here, and we'll kind of keep working our way through the comments here. Let me do item number 7, AT&T's SEC Country Live, 1st and 10. So I thought that Georgia on Saturday, a game that I attended, I'm not going to tell you it means a whole lot because it was Samford, but in the 42-14 final score, I thought that you got a couple hints at something that could make Georgia really good the rest of the way. One of those is the wide receiver position. I talked about that today on my Georgia show. I'll save that for that show. Won't bring that up here. I do want to bring up the name of Georgia running back Nick Chubb with you for a moment, though, because Chubb goes over 130 yards on Saturday. It's actually his 19th career 100-plus yard rushing game since his Georgia career started. That actually moves him second most all time behind just Herschel Walker. He passed Todd Gurley on Saturday with his 19th 100-yard game. But for the first 2 games, Chubb really looked like the 2016 version of himself, the guy that was still hobbled by injury and still probably bottled up by a less than stellar Georgia offensive line. Keeping the opponent in mind, did you see enough from Chubb on Saturday to maybe make you think that he could once again reemerge as the true bell cow of the Georgia offense?
I did. I really did. I thought it was a special night for him. You mentioned the numbers, history-wise, what those numbers mean. But to me, seeing the lateral cuts that he made, I mean, when you look at some of his touchdown runs, being able to explode through the hole, and then when you get to the second level, cut left, cut right, and then outrun the defense to the corner of the end zone, those are special Nick Chubb moves that we haven't. To me, I don't know if I saw those last year. I mean, you can add more to that too, but I don't know if I saw.
Did not see that last year.
I don't know if I saw it to that degree last year. And when you talk about his numbers, 16 carries for 131 yards, that's extreme efficiency. I can remember in 2009 when we were on our way to winning a national title, we played, I think, Tennessee-Chattanooga in a game like this. Mark Ingram got in 10 carries for 102 yards and got out. And that's what you want to do in these games. Consistency on the ground. I think Kirby Smart's starting to bring that attitude. These numbers just affirm that for me.
I mean, I will admit, and on this show I try to be as candid as I possibly can be, I went into Saturday for Georgia thinking its best running back by the end of the season might be the freshman DeAndre Swift. Yeah. The old guy, the veteran, kind of cast a lot for himself on Saturday. But for a Georgia team right now that's all about its defense, and the offense is really lagging behind. If Georgia wants to beat Mississippi State on Saturday, if it wants to play well against Tennessee and Vanderbilt, 2 road games that come in the 2 weeks after that, you're going to have some of these playmakers that you thought were going to be your offensive leaders stepping up, and Chubb would be a real big example of that.
Yeah, and let's give credit also to Georgia's offensive line, the much maligned offensive line that everybody, it seems to be still questioning. And it's not like this is going to establish them as a powerhouse offensive line in the conference or make you say, man, they're going to dominate the line of scrimmage moving forward. But they showed what they needed to show against a team that was outmatched, and it ended up showing in the final score they were outmatched. So credit to them for continuing to get better up front on the offense.
Wolf Walden says, care explain why the media considered Tebow great for winning with his legs, but Hurts is not for the same thing. It's not a matter of Hurts being a very good quarterback. Obviously, he's a high-level quarterback. It's a matter of, will they win the national championship with a quarterback that's still trying to figure it out in terms of the passing game? That's the debate to be had there Logan Westerman, when it comes to Alabama, says he thinks it's the defense more so than the offense. They could hold Alabama back from a national championship. It sounds like you kind of agree with that.
I definitely do. And they're going to get 3 guys, Dylan Moses, Anthony Jennings, and Rashawn Evans, all back this week from injury or suspension, whatever Dylan Moses was out for. I think that's huge. Rashawn Evans can move to the outside linebacker spot and rush the passer. There just wasn't a ton of pressure coming from this defense. I think they're on track now to have 20 sacks this season, a year after they had 56 sacks a year ago. And that's 20 sacks if they play 15 games. So it's concerning, and I think they've got to come up with better ways to be able to rush the passer, whether it be blitz, whether it be some stunts up front on this defensive line, but they've got to find a way to get in the backfield. Colorado State's quarterback took advantage of them.
By the way, Shannon Burgess is also a big LSU fan in the comment section, a guy that's in here almost every day, said, hey, we lost, I commented, we got some work to be done, so a lot of LSU fans taking their medicine today. It's one of those days, and for the most part, every fan base is going to have one of those Mondays here around the SEC. It just happens to be LSU's day this week. Cameron Rodriguez, also an interesting point. He says, y'all know I'm a big Gator, but I'm also realistic. Go Gators, Georgia, Florida decides the East. And, so far I do think, even though it's been 2 Power 5 opponents for Georgia, sort of sandwiched around the Notre Dame game, Georgia, through 3 games, has been advertised. They're 6.5-point favorite over a team that just came off a 30-point beatdown of LSU. I think Georgia, I have to admit here, and I know that some of y'all may say that I'm biased, but I do think through 3 games, Georgia has looked pretty good.
They do look pretty good. And Cameron Rodriguez, another comment I think makes a ton of sense. Look, he says, Franks has a lot of confidence going into this game, and I know Kentucky looked good, but at the end of the day, it's Kentucky. And I think there is a mental hurdle to that. Yeah. Kentucky fans aren't going to agree to that. They're not going to say, you know what, this game's going to be played on the field. But when you look at, what is it, 30 years?
Yeah,
30 years since Kentucky has beat Florida. And I know that obviously the players now don't care about that. None of them were even born when that streak started. But that is a generational gap in victories. And I think there is somewhat of a mental hurdle to that once that statistic starts flying. I think they've got to be able to get over that and move on with this program.
Well, speaking of flying, what was flying around the Florida locker room after the game on Saturday was a pretty big celebration. Eddie Pinheiro, the kicker, kind of caught this one on social media. Take a look at a very happy Florida locker room after the Hail Mary touchdown against Tennessee. It's the subject of item number 8 here on our AT&T SEC Country Live. Florida players pretty happy. Take a look at this.
Hey! Oh!
So before you get, some epileptic seizure out of the shaky camera here, before your vertigo sets in, I have actually a legitimate question to ask you about this. There has been some thought this may be a divided Florida locker room, given the fact that there's been a quarterback controversy. Nothing divides a locker room potentially like a quarterback controversy. Given the fact that some of the guys that you think are supposed to be leaders for your team have been away from the team. Jordan Scarlett, Antonio Callaway, they both remain suspended. There are internet reports today about that story may be getting worse before it gets better. My serious question for you, you've been in locker rooms, so you're a great person to answer this. Do you think that winning the game the way that Florida won it helps Florida tighten the bond that the players have with each other in the locker room? I think there's some reason to believe that when you're not scoring, there's reason to be frustrated. Mark Thompson's called it the play calling, called it the quarterback decision, one of the running backs. Does this help that cause?
You're not even mentioning C.C. Jefferson and Martez Ivey. After McElwain's comments, they look soft
point.
Up front.
Yeah, good point.
They vehemently disagreed with him, and I think that it has been a little bit of a divided locker room. They all had to go their separate ways. A game against Northern Colorado getting canceled that could have put them back on track offensively. I do think this play does a ton for their confidence moving forward. Be it, how strange the victory was, I think that winning cures all, especially when you're playing a team like Tennessee and you're able to get back in the locker room. You're hugging people, you don't even know their names. I mean, there's quality control people coming in. I mean, you're kissing people on the cheek. You feel so good about that victory that it can bring you closer together. I think you're going to see a little bit of that start to pay off for Florida. They obviously have a ton of work to do. Felipe Franks is a work in progress. The offensive line's a work in progress. An incredible receiving core, but some of the defensive things they're doing, work in progress. But they're able to go into this week of practice against a good Kentucky team and have a victory in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, for me, it's that transition away from what might be us versus us, finger pointing, blaming, and sort of shifting that to it's us versus the world. Hey, nobody believes in us because Scarlett's not here, Callaway's not here, and who knows when they're coming back. Jim McElwain didn't offer much of an update on that today. Right now you may have some of that, well, it's your fault, it's my fault, it's us versus us in terms of the outlook for this team. But if you can kind of rally around a central point, if you can rally around an idea that the guys who are here are going to make a move towards the SEC East, then it can be that thing that coaches love to frame, which is that us versus the world debate, us versus everybody, type mindset that a lot of football teams have liked to try to establish.
Yeah, and a lot of the comments we were getting from Florida fans, and we heard it from the Florida team this offseason, was a lack of respect. Hey, we've been to Atlanta 2 years in a row. Why isn't anybody respecting us? obviously we had our questions about the defense. We had our questions about Jeff Collins leaving, about them still trying to find a quarterback. Luke Del Rio seemingly not the guy. They haven't gone that much farther to be able to answer those questions, but hey, they still pulled out a victory this last weekend, and I think anytime you can do that, it's a big deal, especially for where Jim McElwain and this team are at.
Hearing from a lot of Kentucky fans today, Matt Connor says Kentucky's better than everyone thinks. Defense wins, especially at home. My condolences, Florida. So you've already got Big Blue Nation coming out here and saying they feel pretty good about the game on Saturday. Now, back during the offseason, I picked Kentucky to beat Florida. I'm sticking with that pick. I think Kentucky does win on Saturday. But it's kind of funny. Here we are on a Monday on the heels of that win against South Carolina, and Kentucky fans already feel very good about themselves. We've heard from more Kentucky fans today than any point in time since this show's been on the air. Yeah. The same thing's true about Mississippi State. If you watch the comment section today, we've had a lot of comments, but way more Hail State, way more Big Blue Nation stuff than we've had on any other day, at least that I can remember.
Yeah, and listen, I think we all assumed Kentucky would be a lot better this year. When you looked at the weapons they had coming back, I know they lost Boone Williams, Jeff Badette, but they did have a lot of quality players coming back. They had Jordan Jones. They had some guys in the secondary you felt could do good things. Benny Snell established the running game. But when they came out the first 2 weeks, these non-conference games, playing against Southern Miss, winning by a touchdown, and playing against Eastern Kentucky, winning by 11, I don't think that does anything for you to say, man, this team's ready to play with consistency. Obviously, a big victory over South Carolina. I had questions about South Carolina as well, even though they were 2-0 going into that game. But just a huge win. And I think when you're a Kentucky fan right now, being able to enjoy victories like this and get online and talk and boast in the comment section does a lot for your fanhood.
Now, Michael Morrow says that my bias for the Georgia is not more biased than your bias for Alabama. Listen, here's the thing I hope that y'all appreciate on this show, and I mean this in all sincerity. It would not be that hard for me to kind of come in here and do a very different kind of show where you showed no emotion, no personality whatsoever, where I pretended that I didn't have a rooting interest on these Saturdays, and we could pretend that even though you played at Alabama, we see those on ESPN all the time, where these guys, well, I played at this school, but now I don't care who wins games anymore. Frankly, for my belief, that's insulting to your intelligence. And like the one thing we never try to do here on this show is insult anybody's intelligence. We try to come out from the word go about, where our heart lies, where our allegiances lie. And then hopefully when we pick for or against our team or our team's rival, hopefully the evidence speaks for itself there. But that's what we try to do here.
Listen, and I know that there's obviously going to be a little bit of bias between both of us. But I think when you kind of put us in the generalization of any other fan, I think there's less.
Right.
Obviously, we bring less to the table than most. I think it's easy for me to sit up here and say Alabama's the #1 team in the country, and you're never going to question Nick Saban. I've questioned Nick Saban on the show plenty of times. We've questioned the Lane Kiffin decision from last year. I'm questioning this defense right now. There's a lot of work left to be done in Tuscaloosa and in Athens, and for every team that we've talked about today.
Absolutely. All right, item number 9 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. We just showed you a very happy Florida celebration. A very different thing coming from this Tennessee fan, though. There's a lot to sort of try to figure out about this video. Apparently, this young guy, we don't see we don't know how young or old he is, but I'm going to assume he's at least somewhat young. He's got a Peyton Manning Tennessee jersey autographed by Butch Jones. He was so upset with Jones after the Tennessee game against Florida, well, he decided to do this. Take a look.
Butch Jones autographed jersey going up in flames. You're fired, Butch Jones.
Now, my favorite thing about the video is the fact that the guy, he says that last line with such confidence as if it's his decision to make. You're fired, Butch Jones. He's like, I've weighed in on this, and I've looked at both sides, and I've decided you're fired. You're going to lose your job.
Man.
Listen, I'm not for burning jerseys. I'm not for that kind of stuff. I'm really probably not for getting Butch Jones' signature on a Peyton Manning jersey. That's probably its own mistake right there. But I understand where the fan's coming from. I will not lie to you. I understand where he's coming from. There is that moment where you are so frustrated. You don't have AT&T's SEC Country Live to come on and voice your frustration. You don't have a platform to do that. So the only thing you can think to do is set a jersey on fire. I would advise not bringing fire into your college football complaints, but I understand where the guy's coming from.
Yeah, I hate the burning of jerseys. I think that obviously this is a few years in the making when it comes to Butch Jones, because obviously the big win they got over Georgia last year was on a play that was similar to this. The Hail Mary at the end of the game, and Butch Jones went down on his knees on the field, and you feel so good if you're a Tennessee fan, but you have to start looking at games like this to where things are starting to stack up against Butch Jones. And I don't think, I want to give him credit. I think that Tennessee battled in this game. I think they played very hard for their coach. I think that they're a passionate football team. But when games like this start to line up and you start to be able to question some of the play calls, especially John Kelly on the goal line, I'm not sure what they were doing offensively in those different situations. I understand the frustration. I hate the burning of the jersey.
But battling and playing hard in Gainesville against a bitter rival, that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm not going to give you credit for, hey, this team really wanted it for Coach Jones. I mean, Tennessee should be playing hard when it goes to Florida. It ought to be winning some of these games on the road here. I mean, I think it's the mindset that Butch Jones expresses that makes this young man want to burn the jersey. And once again, I don't think you should mix fire with any of this kind of stuff. That can go awry here pretty quick. But I understand why you want to. I do get why you want to.
No, I do too. Like I said, and I'm with you on this. I think you said it perfectly. I hate the burning of the jersey. I don't know why you get the signature on Peyton Manning's jersey to begin with. That's another.
Yeah, well, it's not like Peyton Manning did anything here. How did his name get dragged in this conversation?
That's another story from another time.
He's not the one who sucks.
When Derek Dooley sucked, did you burn orange pants? Like did you go out and?
That's really funny. That's actually a really good line.
Yeah,
that's a really good line.
But I hate the burning of the jersey. I know there's reasons. I hate it either way.
That's a really good line. I hope y'all caught that from Mike. And if you did burn like the Derek Dooley orange breeches, those things are almost for sure made of polyester. Do you know the flame that would just go scorching into the sky if you lit those things on fire? Yeah. I mean, I'm serious. That is not a 100% cotton outfit that Derek Dooley was wearing almost for sure.
Yeah, I think might burn somebody. It was a gasoline on those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me hit a few more comments here. A lot of comments rolling in here today. John McKinney says if Gators play Georgia right now, it would be close. Boy, a lot of Florida talk coming off their win and kind of where they stack up in the SEC East right now. James Patrick says, no one gave Mississippi State a chance again like usual. It's okay. We forgive y'all. And James, I get where Mississippi State fans come from on that. It's not just like the fans who watch AT&T's SEC Country Live or the knucklehead sitting here behind this desk. Every single year the media gathers for SEC Media Days. It's when the official predictions come out. And virtually in every single one of these official predictions, Mississippi State is picked to finish last every single year. And frankly, they never do. So in terms of the overall mindset of the program and really the identity of the program, exceeding expectations and playing well in the face of no one giving you a chance, that really is what Dan Mullen's Mississippi State teams have been known for.
I completely agree. I completely misjudge what this football team is. I don't know that anybody expected this, though. I mean, even the happiest of Mississippi State fans, from the ones I talked to, were hoping for a close game. We're hoping for a 7 to 10 point victory. For everything Dan Mullen's done great, they still had 5 wins last year going into a bowl game against Miami of Ohio, and I think they beat them by 1 point in that game, which, when you go sign, 11 or 13 JUCO prospects and throw them on your defense, you don't feel great about what you have going into the year. I think that's what caused me to ask questions. Credit where credit's due, though. Mississippi State, like I said earlier in the show, absolutely took it to LSU in every facet of this game. Nick Fitzgerald absolutely took over the game.
David Smith says the biggest change I see with Kentucky is how when South Carolina scored in the first play in previous years, with that and the following pick, we're done. Now it's Stoops' mentality. We took it on the chin, dug in, didn't give up, and played some awesome football. So, yeah, awesome football for sure. Kentucky fans ought to feel good about that. In fact, let's make them the subject of item number 10 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So, as big as the Kentucky win was, there was also some controversy after the game about what had happened before the start of the game, about not wanting to do the players captain handshake here, and Steven Johnson seemed to, the Kentucky quarterback seemed to suggest that this was all started by South Carolina. The South Carolina sideline reporter refutes that claim, says it was actually Johnson in Kentucky who started this. I mean, you were a player, and I'm imagining you were part of a lot of captains' handshakes. Are you okay with these teams not wanting to shake hands before the start of the game?
I think it's so ridiculous, and I think it's overblown, and I think Kentucky and Mark Stoops comes out, and listen, I don't know if Mark Stoops was watching. I don't know if he was standing next to these guys. I don't know what they told him that happened during this handshake, but there's different stories from both ends, and I'm never okay with guys coming out to midfield and not shaking hands. I think it shows your age. I think you almost look like you're 16 years old if you're going to be that emotional before a game starts. And we saw trash talk. We saw trash talk before the Mississippi State LSU game. I don't know what the story was. But here's what I want to say to all the captains out there. You're lucky to be able to represent your team at midfield and doing a coin toss.
This is a guy who was a captain on a national championship team, by the way.
You're representing your entire university at midfield for a coin toss. You shake that man's hand across from you. He's putting himself on the line just like you are.
So here's my thought on this, and this obviously comes from the perspective of someone who was not a player, so you can absolutely tell me that I'm wrong here, and I would certainly defer to you on this. My son's 5 years old. He plays some rec league sports. I think that sportsmanship is really important at that age level. The major college level, these guys are playing for money, the chance to earn the attention of NFL scouts. I don't know that I need a whole lot of sportsmanship from these guys doing this right now. I'm not telling you I want to see you disrespect your opponent, but this notion that I'm somehow going to be aggrieved if I don't see total sportsmanship from both sides. I mean, like 5 seconds later, you're going to be trying to injure the other person. So it's like I don't need like the feigning of the handshake to make me believe this is all some sort of glorified, dignified deal. When 2 minutes later, you're going to be trying to like gouge the guy's eye out under his face mask. Like I don't need the theatrics of the handshake. I want my 5-year-old son to sort of shake hands before his flag football game. I don't need Kentucky and South Carolina shaking hands.
Well, I don't know where you draw the line at, though. I mean, you talk about a lack of sportsmanship. I think it's also a lack of respect. I think that's another word that you can kind of use interchangeably there. I think that you have to respect the guy you're playing against because he's trying to do the same things you are. He's under the same circumstances you are, the same pressure that you are. He's trying to get the win. And I think, I don't know where you draw the line if there's a lack of sportsmanship because listen, there's the guy, the freshman from Florida, he goes and gives a double barrels to the Tennessee fan after the game. And we're all talking about, how not classy that is and how he should have done it a different way. I think it's just, what I'm saying is, I think that opens the door for circumstances like that if you're okay with, not shaking hands.
All I'm saying is that whole, hey, respect your opponent, that seems to go out the window and there's a loose ball and everybody's trying on the ground trying to pull that football away. At that point in time, decorum and sportsmanship and respect, that seems to go, I mean, I'm sure that you probably tugged on some things and had some things tugged on that you wouldn't want to say here in an open company.
I'm not gonna lie, I dropped some elbows and some battles for some loose balls before.
But as long as you shake hands before the start of the game, it's all fine. Hey, it's AT&T that brings you SEC Country Live. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. Entertainment your way. And speaking of AT&T, let's do the AT&T look ahead. Now, normally, I actually try to make Monday be about Saturday's games. Yeah. Otherwise, you don't get a chance to talk about them. But some of y'all have already moved ahead to
There's
Kentucky.
Some juicy ones.
Y'all already talking about Kentucky, Florida. You're talking about Vanderbilt, Alabama. You're talking about Mississippi State, Georgia. There are some juicy games. I understand where this comes from. And since I'm a man of the people, you know what? Have at it. Here is the upcoming schedule. It's our AT&T look ahead for what you'll see on Saturday. Arkansas, Texas A&M. These are all Eastern games. We've had people talking about that game in the comment section today. The loser of that game from a coaching standpoint could be in some real trouble. Alabama, Vanderbilt, 3:30. At one point in time, it may seem weird to put this game at 3:30. Vanderbilt's actually pretty good. Georgia, Mississippi State. Remember, coming from the perspective I come from of following Georgia really closely, there was some thought around the Georgia program. There wasn't going to be much of a home schedule this year. Well, it doesn't take much other than 11 versus 17, 7 p.m. matchup to make you feel a lot better about the slate of the Georgia home schedule at that point.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting, too, that, you had a bunch of Tennessee people complaining about their cross-division schedule. Hey, man, we're going to have to play LSU and Alabama this year. Guess what? All of a sudden, things start flipping around where you're going to have to play teams you didn't think were going to be good. I think the same thing goes for Alabama playing Vanderbilt, where you thought, man, this could be a game that, we were able to get some depth, build some depth on, a team like Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt already started to talk the trash. They had the offensive lineman afterwards say, hey, when you come to Nashville, we show you how to play SEC football, and Bama, you're next. That's what I heard coming out of Vanderbilt.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Saturday.
And then a couple other games, Auburn, Missouri. If Auburn can't handle Missouri easily, I don't know what to tell you. You just get off the field at that point in time. Missouri is just flat terrible. And then the Florida, Kentucky.
Wait, so if Missouri wins that game against Auburn, you have to change your pick for the year.
Oh, yeah, listen.
You have to jump off that ship, I guess.
What y'all don't realize is it does not take much to go back and delete these shows. It's like one finger on one button,
all up here,
and
man.
every single one of those shows is deleted. So y'all can come in the comment section every day and say, yeah, you picked Auburn to win the SEC West. If I do this button right here, at that point in time, there won't be any video evidence of that anyway.
You can't delete my memory, BA. You can't delete mine. It's going to be a good game either way.
Yeah, no, it should be a lot of fun. All right, that's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams, AT&T's SEC Country Live, and you mentioned some of the things we'll certainly be talking about throughout the week, but also, we close out our show each and every day the same way, much like Tennessee coach Butch Jones is looking for champions of life, even on the heels of a pretty heartbreaking loss for his Vols team. We're doing the same thing here on AT&T's SEC Country Live, and today it comes from a guy that used to be in the SEC at one point in time, now up in the Big Ten. But listen, you can take the guy to the SEC, but you can't take the SEC out of the guy. And that may be the case with James Franklin. Now, you're going to have to fill me on some of the details here because Penn State is up big against Georgia State, like 56-0, I believe the score was. And Georgia State, travels all the way up to State College. They'd like to score some points. So they're going to line up and kick a field goal, right? They want to get out of the game with having said we scored in Beaver Stadium. We put some points on the board. Yeah. James Franklin, though, was not having that. What happened next?
Well, he calls timeout with the field goal unit on the field, and I guess he says he put a different defense on the field, that his four-string defense couldn't get lined up, so he wanted to put some backups in and make sure. Oh, I think they had 12 guys on the field. He said, I'm calling BS. I'm calling BS completely on that, James Franklin. What you wanted was the shutout there in Beaver Stadium. You wanted to be able to say 56-0. I know that he's an emotional guy. He loves to throw out the shutout, term and the goose egg on the scoreboard. He was icing that kicker. There's no doubt in my mind.
And I got to tell you, I actually don't mind you playing to the echo of the whistle here. It's a 60-minute game. Even if you're up 56-0, you're paying him like $1 million. I mean, if you're going to pay him $1 million, you get to do whatever you want to do at that point in time. I actually don't mind Franklin playing this thing down to the end.
It's just, to me, that is what is to be loved about James Franklin. That's why I think I'm sad that we don't have him in the SEC anymore.
Yeah, no, exactly right, because I think he's doing a good job there at Penn State. Hey, thank you all for being here with us on AT&T's SEC Country Live today. I got a little behind the comments, so if I didn't get to yours late in the show, I apologize. We'll make sure we get that tomorrow. You can also check out the podcast version of our show. We post it for you each and every day at iTunes. You can subscribe there. It's also on SoundCloud as well. But if you subscribe, give us a rating and review at iTunes. It certainly helps us. And make sure you share the show with your friends on Facebook. Let them know we're talking SEC football each and every day here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. We'll be back tomorrow again, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. As Mike said, there are some juicy matchups in the SEC this week, and I'm looking forward to diving into them all. We'll see you then. Have a great day, everybody. Oh, Lord. About 3:45, I was like, oh, gosh, I feel like I'm going to throw up. Oh, man. That was not a good feeling.
Oh, man, that stinks. And I absolutely dropped the ball in Champion Life. I have a great Champion Life for tomorrow. There's a guy at the bar, like one of the main bars in Tuscaloosa, who's in a wheelchair. And they were getting rowdy after the game on Saturday night, and they all lifted up his wheelchair, and he's just chugging beer up on the top.
That is incredible.
I was like, once we got the show, I was like, oh my God, how did I not think about that? We sat here forever trying to figure one out.
Although if you don't have a picture of it, it kind of makes it a little bit tougher to tell that story.
Video on Instagram.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
They posted it. The bars.
Oh, that's fantastic.
They're my boys, too.
Yeah, we'll take care of them for sure. Oh, Lord, I feel terrible. Sorry you had to sit by me today.
What'd you say? Oh, sorry. No, you're good, buddy. You battled through. Will to win.
Yeah, that's right.
Could also do the Vanderbilt fans exiting the stadium screaming, "We want Bama."
Yeah, I will definitely do that.
Here it is right here. Check this guy out. This guy is losing an absolute dream. You have to obviously.
Oh my gosh. That is incredible.
This is the bar that we do our pregame show from.
That is incredible. It's like a Jewish wedding.